Gentlemen, the last 4 decades have been an era of radical shift in the world in almost every realm, but none perhaps have been as revolutionized as the area of marriage and relationships. For all of human history, we have tried a plethora of marriage and monogamy models. We have flirted with alternative systems like polyamory and polygamy. We have even tried free-for-all systems that are completely unrestrained by social conventions. This is the current world we live in. Since 1960 and the invention of the contraceptive pill, the institution of marriage has been on a steep decline, and every passing year the world is moving to devolutionize and decentralize. We are becoming an atomized society of individuals with very little values, morals, and institutions to bind us. The sexual revolutionaries of the womanist movement have taught us for the last several decades that this was a good idea. They put pleasure above commitment, family, and loyalty, and the fruits of the large-scale social experiment are finally beginning to ripen. Sure, there are many drawbacks with the monogamous setup, but some structure is better than no structure. This is why when the current system is coming back to haunt them, especially with the rights of the movements like MGTOW, feminists are looking back at the model they broke down and realizing the many good things about the world are now sorely missed. This reverence and nostalgia is forcing them to reconsider their choices and policies that they advocated for the past, and becoming aware of the mess that has been created in the modern dating world. But the genie is out of the bottle, and it's very hard to cage it back. Remember, it is always easier to break an egg than to reassemble it. This is why I believe that the damage done in the world in the last 40 years is almost irreversible. It can take enormous authoritarian and bureaucratic power to undo it, and that's not something I can advocate for. There are some things the model of traditional marriage and monogamy ensures for men that they now find it hard to find. And I'll list some of them here so you have an idea of what the womanist champions are missing. That was a world where the father went outside to work and had the financial burden of taking care of all other members, while the mom was to be in charge of bringing up children. The world today, especially those of the leftist bent, refuse to even acknowledge that there is such a thing as fathers and mothers. The pendulum has swung too far. We have gone haywire. But today, where both genders are out in the workplace and no one to tend to the kids, the newer generation of individuals are becoming more detached and distraught from a more traditional family system than they don't realize would serve them so much better. I've often said that there are a handful of things that every society must safeguard in order to make sure that it is healthy and functioning and can survive in the long term. Two of those things is male aggression and sexuality. One is the bringing up of children, and another is the care and protection of women during pregnancy and childbirth. Every social system we create and every institution we curate must keep in mind these factors and remember to take these into account. The traditional marriage and monogamy of the 1950s safeguarded the rights of children and women, but was hard on men. They were the ones to work and toil for others, while they had access to only one sexual outlet. However, the thing that was contained most effectively in that world was male aggression. Remember, young men driven by testosterone and their hormones make up a vast majority of violent crimes, and there are very good reasons for it. If men are violent, they are always violent for a reason. They want something they cannot have, and thus anger manifests in frustration. Marriage for long-tamed men gave them a load of responsibility and got their anger and frustration under control for centuries. There is a kind of mate guarding and competition in men that runs deep in our biology. It is the root to many of the social issues that exist today, especially crime and the mass of sexless men in the world who are becoming nihilistic and then turning to violent activity as a release. The second and perhaps the most important thing that marriage guaranteed for women that feminists are yearning to get back is the prospect of having a man by your side during pregnancy and childbirth. This sets apart the modern world from the pre-modern by a long shot and can perhaps be called one of the greatest differentiators between a sexual marketplace that is free for all versus one that is constrained and regulated by social institutions. The percentage of single mothers in the Western world today is reaching a dangerously high number, to the point that most children today are growing up without parental and financial care of a father. This has long-term reverberating effects across society and impacts women in the most vulnerable state they will ever be. Marriage and family provided women with a safe space during this phase, where they could let loose and be carefree for the financial and protection burden that comes with rearing and having a child. From hunting mammoths to working dead-end jobs, it was the men that went out throughout history and brought in the resources that the women could use to cater to the children. This is the dynamic that has been lost in the modern world and is giving women a reality check. Many modern feminists are now taking a turn back and realizing what they left was perhaps not so bad. After all, especially witnessing the conundrum that women are in today. Freedom is always accompanied by a responsibility, but the womanist movement forgot to give them the latter message, and it's coming back to bite them. There is now a counter-revolution brewing, where there is an underlying urge to go back to a similar world order, or to at least reconstruct one from the ground up that can safeguard the interests and long-term provisioning of women. I see so many women today disillusioned by the fantasies that modern womanism portrays to them and realizing it was a fad all along. When they realize that sexual freedom means nothing to them in their later years, and they were never taught by the architects of the modern social order to plan their life across the span of 7 or 8 decades. Unfortunately, this constant social messaging is now going into overdrive, and efforts against it will have to do the same. Always, to get a social agenda part of the social fabric, you must make sure it gets to the children who are the future generation. And that's what the popular leftist social narrative is trying to do. Today, young girls that have hardly ever hit puberty are being sold a false bill of rights. They are being taught that their bodies are their greatest asset. But that is only true until they have it. It won't be their greatest asset when they're 40, and that's when they realize they forgot to build something substantial for themselves besides their looks. A number of teenage pregnancies are on the rise, and the alarming rate at which young single moms are having to work and toil in their early 20s just to make ends meet makes me shudder. Why did we let this happen to them? It is truly a modern tragedy. The current social order is bifurcating both young boys and girls into division, and exacerbating the natural pits they would fall into unless guided by society. These pits are that of sexuality for girls and violence for boys. But the modern world refuses to acknowledge the need for proper social restraints needed to make sure they don't bury themselves in the troubles they create for themselves in their youth. This is the fallout of breaking down social norms, and this is why women are realizing that marriage and monogamy must be brought back. This channel is meant to arm you with the knowledge to navigate this complex world. I want you to be one step ahead of all social movements so they don't adversely affect you. So like this video and subscribe to the channel for more great content. Until next time.